One of the weird things about these drugs is we don't actually know how they work. It's very disconcerting to interview the leading scientists and realize this. If you want a comparison for how big these drugs are going to be, you've got to look at the invention of the smartphone. 8 years from now, when Ozempic goes out, assuming we don't discover some horrific side effect, and I do not rule that out, half the population of the United States will be taking them. I mean, that's going to transform the economy. Look already what's happening. You know, my book is called Magic Pill. If you think about the classic stories of magic that we grew up with, you find the lamp, you rub it, you get the genie, you make the wish. And your wish comes true, but never quite in the way you expected.
I have to say, it's funny, I wasn't going to start the interview off this way, but now I feel like it's just natural. You look good, man. I mean, you look like you lost a little bit of weight, which is very apropos what we're going to talk about right now.
It's creepily apt, I think is the right phrase.
Yeah, creepily apt. So has it's been working for you? Well, I guess we'll get to that in a bit. I want to back up, though. I really related to your story at the beginning of the book, which is you go to a party like right post pandemic, and you're like, oh, I'm the fat guy at the party, and I myself got quite fat during the pandemic. I had, we had kids, and I was just like ordering DoorDash every day. Which are you familiar with that? I know you live in the UK.
My God, it's responsible for at least 3 of my chins. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Same here. So I got quite chubs. And your fried chicken story, going to the fried chicken place and they send you like this nice note, like, thanks to our best customer. And you're like, geez, this isn't even my top fried chicken place. Like that sunk in for me. That hit for me because I got a message from DoorDash. It was like an email or something. And it was like, since you signed up with Dash Pass, which is like their premium saver thing, you've saved $4,000. And I was like, not spent $4,000.
Wow.
Saved $4,000.
Well done.
And, like,
you're a true American.
I mean,
they
should
give you the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Of something, because I've never felt like such an idiot in my whole life, because I was just like saved. My wife and I were like, let's not do the math on what we had to spend to save $4,000 in DoorDash fees. And that was the impetus for me hiring a personal trainer. And it's been 3 to 5 days a week since. But then, of course, exercise doesn't make you thin. And we can talk about that later, too. But I just wanted to say that landed for me hard because I was like, I get being the guy at the party who's like, why is everyone skinny? I thought we all agreed to get fat during the pandemic. What the hell?
It was the weirdest. It's so weird. This book has been a bit different to my other books for me in that the minute I learned about the existence of these drugs, I felt really conflicted. And it comes from that moment at this party, right? So I remember it so vividly. It was the winter of 2022. It was the first party I'd been invited to in God knows how long because the world had not been having parties. And I was in an Uber on the way there and the party was being thrown by an Oscar-winning actor. I'm not saying that just to name drop. It is very relevant to what happened next. And I was thinking on the way there, just feeling really schlubby, like I'd been quite fat at the start of the pandemic and then I'd gained loads of weight. And I thought, oh, it's going to be a bit, a Hollywood party, being a bit fat, so it's a bit embarrassing. And then suddenly I thought, oh, but wait. Everyone I know gained weight during the pandemic. This is going to be fascinating to see these Hollywood stars with a bit of chub on them, right? And I arrived and I started walking around and literally everyone was gaunt. It wasn't that they hadn't gained weight, they'd all visibly lost weight. They looked like their own Snapchat filters, like clearer and cleaner and sharper. And I was kind of in a bit of a daze and I bumped into a friend of mine on the dance floor and I said to her, looks like everyone really did take up Pilates during lockdown. And she laughed, right? And I had no idea why she was laughing. I must have done some weird face. And she said, well, this isn't Pilates, right? And I had no idea what she was talking about. And she pulled up on her phone an Ozempic pen, an image of an Ozempic pen. And that was when I learned we now have a new kind of weight loss drug that works in a totally new way, where if you take it, the average person loses 15% of their body weight in a year. For the next of this class of drugs, Mounjaro, you lose on average 21% of your body weight. And for the next ones that will be available next year, Triple G, you lose 24% of your body weight, which is only slightly below bariatric surgery. And the minute I learned this, I immediately thought, okay, I can see the benefits. I'm older now than my grandfather ever got to be. He died of a heart attack at the age of 44. Loads of the men in my family get up with heart disease. My dad had very bad heart problems. My uncle died of a heart attack. My other uncle had a heart attack. I knew that, sadly, the science is very clear that obesity makes heart disease much more likely, along with an actually shocking array of other problems. It makes over 200 known diseases and complications more likely. So I was aware that if you've got a drug that can reverse or hugely reduce obesity, that may well massively boost health. I
Yeah.
also immediately thought, wait a minute.
What's the catch?
I've seen this story before, right? Every 20 years or so, a new diet drug is announced. We're told it's going to save the world, it's going to end obesity, and loads of people stampede to take it. And then we always discover it has some catastrophic side effect that, means it has to be pulled from the market, leaving a trail of devastated people in its wake. I also thought, what about people with eating disorders? What about the progress we've made with body positivity? I just immediately had all sorts of doubts. So to get to the bottom of this, as you allude to, for a year I took this drug and I went on this big journey all over the world, from Iceland to Minneapolis to Okinawa in the south of Japan, to interview the leading experts in the world on this question, the biggest critics, the biggest defenders, the scientists who made the breakthroughs that led to these drugs, the people who've been thinking about how is it going to affect our culture and our economy. And it's kind of weird, Jordan. It's a bit different to the previous books we talked about. I learned a huge amount about the extraordinary benefits of these drugs, about the 12 disturbing risks of these drugs, about what they're going to do to all of us in all sorts of complicated ways. But at the end of this journey, although I know so much more, I'm still quite conflicted. Anyone whose reaction to these drugs is, yay, they're going to uncomplicatedly save us all, or boo, they're the devil, I think is missing the much more complicated and interesting picture in the middle. This is complicated. We have to really think through the detail of what it's doing to people and doing to the culture in a much more nuanced way than I think we instinctively do when we hear about these drugs.
Well, we want black and white thinking, right? I talk about this all the time. Is we want certainty, where we're like, oh, okay, I read Johann Hari's book, Ozempic, bad. Next, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh, but bad if you're like a fit person and you need to lose 5 pounds and you're just going to take it because all your friends are. But like otherwise, yeah. What's worse, dying of a heart attack when you're age 44 because you have serious problems, or like something might go wrong later but also maybe not, you stay on it for. Anyway, you mentioned earlier other health drugs in the past. Other health drugs include amphetamine, right? Fen-phen, which I'm not sure if that's also amphetamine, but I remember the fen-phen thing from like, you ever see that movie Requiem for a Dream?
Yeah,
where
literally the most depressing film ever made. If I ever kill myself, I will watch that film first to get me into the mood, right?
Into the mood. Exactly. And the old lady, she's strung out on, I can't, like Dexatrim. They don't say the name, but it's like, and I remember Dexatrim ads from, you probably do too. You're 79, I'm 1980. I remember watching TV and it's like Dexatrim, and there's a skinny lady being like, I lost it all with Dexatrim. And then you look up, I was like, whatever happened to that? And I look it up and it's like, oh, this is banned because it's literally just speed for housewives. And it's like, you can't take that, you will die.
It's fascinating, this, looking at the history of diet drugs. Did not put me in a good frame of mind for taking Ozempic, although I did have some positive and negative effects on Ozempic. I'm sure we're going to get into the details on that. But if you look at the history of diet drugs, it's pretty grim. So the modern history of diet drugs begins in the First World War. There was a factory in France where loads of soldiers were working with an explosive powder called dinitrophenol. And someone noticed they lost a shitload of weight, right? So after the war, some American scientists from Stanford went and studied this, and they realized if they were absorbing it through their skin and swallowing it, it was an explosive powder. It made you lose loads of weight. So they turned it into a pill called Reducel. And when you consider how incredibly low obesity was at the time, it was incredibly popular. 100,000 people were using it. Then they discovered something unfortunate, which is that if you use it, you start to go blind.
You start to go blind, yeah.
And then you go into a horrific raging fever in which, as one doctor put it, your body cooks itself. I mean, It works by speeding up your metabolism because it is literally cooking you from within, right?
Yeah.
So that got yanked from the market for obvious reasons.
But bodybuilders still use it. They still use it. It's called DNP in the bodybuilding community. And yes, it makes you go blind. You can get like a 107 fever and have to take ice baths in order to not die. And it cooks your brown fat, which like this way too in the weeds, but you need brown fat. It's around your organs and stuff. And if you don't have it, I can't remember exactly what it does, but it's basically like you don't get to choose which fat it cooks off. It cooks off the stuff you need to survive and also cooks off the stuff that, makes your underwear stretch out. And that's not good.
Yeah, it turns out a great advertising slogan is not "Take our drug, we'll cook you internally," right? Not the best slogan in the world. And that goes on pretty much every 20 years. We go through amphetamines, we go through jaw wiring, a particularly savage and hideous practice. What people don't know, that literally dentists would take obese people and literally wire their jaw shut so they couldn't eat and they could only get a straw for liquids. But it turns out, well, A, that's just inherently barbaric and horrific, but B, if you vomit while you've got jaw wiring, you choke to death. Right, so it was unbelievably, and of course was a complete failure. The minute you unwired the person's jaw, they went back to eating, and they were in fact ate more because they were really traumatized by this unbelievably humiliating experience. Then you mentioned fen-phen. So fen-phen, for people who don't remember this, in the mid-90s, fen-phen was talked about in almost exactly the way that that Ozempic is talked about now. The front page of Time magazine was the new miracle weight loss drug. And the way it worked, it was a combination of two drugs. It was a combination of an appetite suppressant called flexfluoramine, which had been around for a while but made you drowsy, so it was never that popular, and an amphetamine called phentermine, which counteracted the drowsiness and also made you wired and made you burn more calories. And it was massively popular. In 1995, in the United States alone, there were 18 million fen-phen prescriptions that were written, right?
Wow.
And it worked incredibly well. People on it lost shitloads of weight. And then some doctors in Fargo, North Dakota, noticed that some of their patients seemed to be having trouble breathing when they took this drug. There was then an investigation. It turned out that it gave you something called primary pulmonary hypertension, which is when the blood vessels in your lungs contract. It's absolute agony. It's incurable. You have to be on oxygen for the rest of your life or you die. And lots of people died. It led to the biggest payout in the history of the pharmaceutical industry, $12 billion, biggest at the time. So, obviously looking at all this, I'm thinking, okay, is Ozempic going to turn out to be like fen-phen?
Yeah.
And I don't think it will, but there's many reasons to be worried. But you alluded to right at the start, I think before we talk about the risk, Jordan, I think it's really important because actually I'm not generally on a one hand on the other hand kind of guy, as you know. But in this case, I think the truth is genuinely complicated and there are good arguments on both sides.
I wanted to highlight the idea that like these drugs always end up terrible. And I'm not a woo-woo guy. I'm like a very sciencey guy, which is why I love your work. But I'm always like, okay, something's got to give, you know, yin and yang or whatever way you want to look at it. There's no such thing as a free lunch, my dad likes to say, and he thinks that sounds deep. But like,
well, you should bear in mind that on Ozempic it would be a smaller free lunch, but
it would be a lunch you just stared at and didn't eat.
Exactly,
Yeah.
It'd be a tiny free lunch composed mainly of dust. But no, so let's think about the benefits first, right? Because
Sure.
they're really important. And if you want to think about the benefits, one of the places I would start is actually by looking at a parallel area of science. So people have only been taking these drugs for obesity for a couple of years now. They've been taking it for diabetes for much longer, 18 years. But so up to now, it's been very hard, not impossible, but very hard to lose loads of weight and keep it off over the long term. Some people can do it just through calorie restriction. We all know people like that, but it's surprisingly rare. So the best comparison point for the effects of these drugs, I think, is actually bariatric surgery. Things like stomach stapling, gastric bands, that kind of thing. So if we look at that surgery, what do we know? A few important things. Firstly, it's a horrible operation. It's extremely grueling. 1 in 1,000 people dies during the surgery. It's
I
no
didn't know
joke.
that.
But people do it for a very good reason, which is that if you massively reverse your obesity or reduce it or reverse it completely, the benefits for your health are staggering. So if you have bariatric surgery in the 7 years that follow, you are 56% less likely to die of a heart attack. You are 60% less likely to die of cancer. You are 92% less likely to die of diabetes-related causes. In fact, it's so good for your health that you're 40% less likely to die at all of any cause, right, in the 7 years that follow. So there's a lot we know about that, and we can now see that these drugs are having a similar effect. So if you take Ozempic, for example, for 2 years and you started with a BMI higher than 27, your chances of having a heart attack or stroke go down by 20%. That's huge.
That's huge.
Reduction. Yeah. And bear in mind, you know, people with BMI of 27 were only slightly overweight, right? So you're talking about...
Right, it's not 30. and 35 and
Exactly.
40. Right.
Exactly. And that was obviously a topic very close to my heart, like literally close to my heart because of the heart
Yeah.
disease in my family, right? So the benefits are very clear. And this will sound weird, but the thing I learned in all the research for the book and all the experts I interviewed and all the science I did a deep dive into will sound really weird. The thing that most surprised me is the thing I thought I'd known since I was a little boy. If you'd asked me when I was a kid, is obesity bad for your health, Johann? I would have said, well, yeah, right? I was amazed by the scientific evidence about how bad for your health it is. Now, that doesn't for a minute justify stigma and body shaming, and which I hate and I'm strongly opposed to. I'm sure we'll get to that. But we do have to tell the truth about the science. And there's a very strong scientific consensus around this. Think about something as simple as diabetes, right? So, okay, I've known since I was a kid, if you're obese, you're more likely to get type 2 diabetes. But I did think, until quite embarrassingly recently, okay, it's not good to be diabetic. And if you're obese when you're 18, you have a 70% chance of becoming diabetic. But, provided you got health insurance and you get insulin, you're fine. You're basically like everyone else. A diabetic plus insulin is basically me or you, I thought, right? From interviewing doctors who treat diabetics, I mean, that is not the case at all. Even when you get treatment, diabetes knocks 15 years off your life on average. It's the
I didn't
biggest
know that.
It's the biggest cause of preventable blindness in the United States. More people in the US have to have a limb or extremity amputated in the US because they got diabetes than because they got shot. And you will have noticed a lot of us get shot, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
In fact, the effects of diabetes alone are so severe that one of the leading doctors in Britain, one of the best known doctors in Britain, Dr. Max Pemberton, who treats diabetics, said to me, if you gave me a choice between becoming HIV positive or becoming diabetic, I would choose to become HIV positive. Because if you're
Really?
HIV positive and you get treatment, you live as long as everyone else. That is not true of diabetes, right? It radically shortens your life, and it makes it much more likely you'll have a horrific final few years where you're blind or have dementia or lose whole parts of your body. And that's just one of the causes of obesity. Never mind cancer, dementia, heart disease, stroke. So when we're thinking about the benefits and risks of these drugs, you have to think about it in this context. For me, realistically, I tried dieting many times. I'd lost weight and I always regained more than I had at the start. For me, the dilemma was, what are the risks of continuing to be obese versus what are the risks of these drugs, right? Now, different people come into the possibility of taking these drugs with different levels of risk, right? You mentioned before, skinny people, right? People at that party that I went to, none of them were fat at the start. They're not taking the drug to go down from obesity to a healthy weight. They're taking the drug to go down from actually being skinny already to being super skinny, right? Sharon Osbourne has talked about this, and I mean, look at her. She looks, very unwell. I'm very concerned for her. So they're taking on all the risks for none of the health benefits. Obviously, they believe there are aesthetic benefits, and I'm particularly non-judgmental about the women in this situation because women are made to feel like shit about their bodies whatever they do.
Right,
so
exactly.
It's not they're making that choice in an environment that they didn't choose where there are intolerable pressures on them. So I get that. I'm not being judgy or finger wagging towards them because I think that would be foolish and cruel. But so there's one set of risk around people who are skinny. Actually, they're endangering their own health because one of the 12 risks of these drugs is when you lose weight using any method, you usually lose muscle mass. And muscle mass is the total amount of soft tissue in your body. It's essential for like movement, climbing the stairs, getting out of a chair or whatever. And as you age, depressingly, starting when you're 30 years old, you begin to lose muscle mass every year. You lose about 8% a year from the age of 30. We're well on the downward curve here, Jordan.
Yeah, man.
So if you're
Not fun.
not fun. If you're going into the aging process with already depleted muscle mass, you put yourself much more at risk of having dangerously low muscle mass as you age, which causes a condition called sarcopenia. It means poverty of the flesh in Greek. It's basically where you just don't have enough muscle mass. You can't climb the stairs. You can't get out of a chair. You're much more limited in what you can do. So there's a risk that particularly the people who take it to be super skinny will get some aesthetic benefit now, but we could be setting in train a time bomb of people, 30, 40, 50 years from now who are going to be much more frail and unwell as they age and much more likely to fall.
They're going to have that 90-year-old body at age 65 or something because they cut their lean mass down. And it's very hard to build that. I mean, I know from working out with a trainer, it's very hard to build that back up. And it's literally not possible if you're not getting enough calories. Like my trainer's like, you need to eat more. You are not eating enough. And I'm like, well, but wait, I want to lose. And he's like, you can either gain muscle or lose weight. You can't do really both things at the same time. That's why bodybuilders do bulking and cutting cycles, and it's a whole thing. And this isn't just for bodybuilders. This is like for people who want to be in decent shape. You can't be a gaunt Kate Moss body type and then also hit the gym and build muscle. It just doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, you can't be Timothy Chalamet and Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? You got to choose.
Right. Yes.
What you're saying actually connects to another one of the 12 risks related to these drugs, which is very is one of the more common ones, malnutrition, right? And I really got a sense of how easy that is when I started taking them. I will never forget the second day that I was on Ozempic. I was lying in bed and I woke up and I thought, oh, I feel something really weird. What is it? And I couldn't locate in my body what it was that felt weird. And it took me literally 5 minutes to realize, shit, I woke up and I'm not hungry, right? Every day of my life before that, I would wake up with like a raging hunger. It was often what got me out of bed was being hungry and wanting food. And I thought, oh, this is weird. So I went up the road. There's a diner that I used to go to every morning, run by a lovely Brazilian woman called Tatiana. And I went in and I ordered the thing I would order every morning, which was a huge brown bread roll with loads of chicken and loads of mayo. I'm not proud. And she brought it over and I had like less than a quarter of it and I was full. I thought, this is weird. And I left. Actually, Tatiana called after me saying, are you okay? When I left, because you're like, why is that you left? He's never done this before.
Wait.
And that day I went.
Normally this is gone before I check on you, but now you're leaving? Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, and it's the second day. Sorry, in fact, that also on the second day. So I'll say that again. And then for lunch that day, there's a Turkish restaurant near where I live, next to my office, where I went in, I ordered the same lunch I always order. Mediterranean lamb it was. And again, I had like 3 mouthfuls. I was full. This is really weird. So what these drugs do is they make you feel much fuller, much faster, right? To an extraordinary degree. That's why I went from eating about 3,200 calories on a typical day to about 1,800. It's why I've lost 42 pounds, right? In a little bit more than a year. But there's a lot of good things about that, obviously, but one of the risks of that is malnutrition, particularly people taking high doses. For example, a close relative of mine is taking these drugs and literally was like wasting away. Like her kids had to remind her, hey, you got to eat, right? Like so there's this, and there's also risk there's a risk of malnutrition from not eating enough.
Right.
From chronically undereating that's very serious, I think, with this. It's why actually some doctors are now prescribing alongside the drugs a diet plan, not at the time typical diet plan to cut down, but a diet plan to make sure you eat enough.
Right. Yeah. So for someone like me who I lost 40 pounds of fat, it took 10 months. I was weighing my food, but I was like getting 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight ish for those 10 months. And it was not like injecting something. I mean, this is like protein shake in the morning, decent lunch, and then a packet of turkey breast with some mustard for dinner every day, give or take, for 10 months. And my wife was like, I can't believe you have the discipline to do that. And I was like, I can't believe I have the discipline to do that. But it's just one of those things I set my mind to. But 10 months of that is something that most people even when I look back now, I'm like, I don't think I could do that again. That was kind of miserable. And it took forever. The idea that there's a drug that can get you there faster, and I was not obese. And I kind of want to talk about what that means. 26% of the people in the UK are obese, 42% in the US are obese. What is the difference between overweight and obese? I know there's a difference, but I cannot remember for the life of me what it is.
It's very simple. BMI, which is dividing your height by your weight. If your BMI is between 25 and 30, you're overweight. If your BMI is over 30, you're obese. So it's a very simple way of measuring.
Okay.
But I'm just thinking about what you're saying, Jordan. It's so interesting, right? that difficulty you would have now to exercise that willpower, right? I think it's fascinating. Willpower is a very real phenomenon, right? We've all exercised willpower at some point, right, over something. When people sort of deny it exists in relation to weight, I'm always like, no, you're being too simplistic. Equally, the people who think it's the only thing going on, I think, are being too simplistic. It's worth thinking about, what is the factor that's undermining our willpower? Because it actually leads us. For a long time, I thought I was looking at two different questions. Why did people gain so much weight so quickly? And how do these drugs work? Actually, it turns out the answer lies in the same word. That word is satiety, which is the feeling of having had enough and not wanting any more. I'll come back to that word in a minute, but just start with the explosion in obesity in our lifetimes. I think you're a year younger than me, right? So
I'm probably younger than you by like, you're 79. I'm early 80s. So like,
Right,
we're
right. So we're a
probably
year
within
apart, yeah.
6 to 10 months or a year. Yeah.
Between the year we were born and the year we turned 21, obesity doubled in the United States.
Wow.
And then in the next 20 years, severe obesity doubled again. If you want to get a sense of this, everyone listening, just pause the podcast for a second and Google photographs of beaches in the United States in 1979 and just look at them, right? You look at them and it seems really weird to us. Everyone is what we would call slim or jacked. Everyone, right? You look at it and go, well, this must have been like a skinny person convention that day. What's going on? And then you look at the population figures. No, that is what people look like in the United States in the year we were born. Not a million years ago, not before the Civil War, right? Literally when we were born. So what happened, right? What happened is, the evidence is pretty clear about what happened. Obesity explodes everywhere that makes one change. It's not where people lose willpower. It's not where people become greedy. It's where people move mostly from eating fresh whole foods that were prepared on the day to eating mostly processed or ultra-processed foods that were built out of chemicals in factories in a process that actually isn't even called cooking, it's called manufacturing food. So we have 300,000 years where humans ate mostly whole foods and obesity was exceptionally rare. And then in our lifetimes, there's this dramatic swing to, 78% of the calories the average American child consumes in a day are now processed or ultra-processed food. And that leads to this extraordinary explosion of obesity. And if you want to understand why, it's kind of simple. I mean, there's many things going on, but the core of it is that this new kind of food, which has never existed before, undermines our ability to ever feel full and know we've had enough. And there's loads of evidence for this that I go through in the book, but there's an experiment that to me really nails it, right?
Oh, yeah. Cheesecake rats, baby. You tell me about cheesecake rats?
You know you want it.
This is gross. Like, legit made me kind of like have a bubbly stomach when I read
Exactly.
it.
I'm going to promote your weight loss by reminding you of this
Yes.
experiment every day. So there's a scientist who's the head of neuroscience at Mount Sinai University called Professor Paul Kenny. Brilliant guy.
Yeah.
He grew up in Dublin in Ireland. And in the 90s, he moved to San Diego, I think, to do his PhD and continue his scientific research. And he quickly realized, wow, Americans don't eat like Irish people did at the time. There was a lot more processed food, a lot more sugary and fatty food. And like many a good immigrant, he quickly assimilated. And within a year, he gained like 30 pounds. And he was like, whoa, what's going on here? And he started to feel like this food he was consuming wasn't just changing his gut. It was changing his brain. It was changing his whole relationship with food. So he designed an experiment to test this, which I have nicknamed Cheesecake Park. It's very simple. He built a cage and he raised rats in it. And all they had to eat was the kind of natural, healthy food that rats had evolved to eat over thousands of years. And it turned out when they had that food, the rats would eat when they were hungry and stop when they were full. They never overate. They never became overweight or obese. Given that food, they had a kind of natural nutritional wisdom that stopped them overeating. Okay, then Professor Kenny introduced them to the American diet. He fried up some bacon, he bought some Snickers bars, and crucially, he bought some cheesecake, and he put it in the cage alongside the option of the healthy food. And the rats went crazy for the American diet. They would literally hurl themselves into the cheesecake and eat their way out, just completely slicked with cheesecake. They ate and ate and ate and ate. And that natural nutritional wisdom they'd had with the old kind of food completely disappeared. As Professor Kenny put it to me, within a couple of days, they were different animals. And very rapidly, they were all obese, right? Then Professor Kenny tweaked the experiment in a way that to me as a former KFC addict seems a little bit cruel. He took away the American diet and left them with nothing
Yeah.
but the healthy food again. And he was pretty sure he knew what would happen. they would eat less of the they would eat more of the healthy food than they had before, and this would prove that that kind of diet expands the number of calories you eat in a day.
Okay.
That is not what happened. What happened was much weirder. Once they'd been exposed to the American diet, they refused to eat the healthy food at all. It was like they no longer recognized it as food. It was only when they were literally starving and wasting away that they finally reluctantly went back and ate it. Professor Gerald Mann, who's at Harvard, who designed the food label that's on all food that's sold in the US, said to me, we know there's something about the food we're eating that is undermining our ability to feel full. So this word satiety, this food has robbed us of our satiety. It kept coming up. And then I kept hearing that word come up again when we talk about these drugs. Because what these drugs do is they give you back your sense of satiety. Dr. Daniel Drucker, who made the key breakthrough, one of the key breakthroughs in discovering GLP-1, which is the heart of how Ozempic works, sure we'll talk about that, said to me, what they give you back is your satiety hormones. They give you back that feeling of being full. I realized I don't think I'd ever felt full in my life until I took Ozempic, right? Not really full, not like, I'd had times when I'd had too much and couldn't bear to eat anymore because I'd vomit, but that's different to feeling sated, right? You get sated in other things in life. You get sated in, well, sex, for example. The times when you have sex and it's really good and then it's over and you're like, even if like the hottest person in the world came into the room, you would be like, I'm really sorry. I'm sated now, you know.
What's on Netflix? Yeah,
exactly. So sorry, Keanu. Well, actually, to be fair, just in case Keanu Reeves listens to your podcast, I want to be clear, Keanu, I would find a way. But but yeah, you know that feeling, right? But so yeah, and when I started to see it that way, there's a brilliant professor in Philly, Professor Michael Lowe, who said to me, what you realize is these drugs are an artificial solution to an artificial problem.
Yeah.
Processed food dug a hole of an insatiable hunger in all of us, and the drugs fill in the hole, but in their own risky, complicated way.
Right, because we don't get full from junk food, and I kind of looked up a few of the reasons why. First of all, the way they make it is horrifying. I'll talk about it in the show close, but we don't get full. There's junk food almost has virtually no fiber. It's a really good blend of fat and protein. That's why when you eat one sort of like barbecue chip, you're like, I need 1,000 more of these because it's just like the
Only
flavor
1,000?
profile.
What kind of you, Jesus.
Whatever's left in the bag is going down, and you have to. I'm like, I'll go to my wife. I'm like, take these away from me, and she's like, good. And then she's eating them, and I'm like, that wasn't the solution we were looking for. And it's easier. Also, liquids. I was at the mall yesterday with my kids, taking them to some like fun thing, and I was thirsty, so I went to the vending machine, and they had Coke, Mountain Dew, Diet Coke. There was nothing like. There was nothing that wasn't just a soft drink in there that had 1,000 calories in whatever 2-liter bottle or 20-ounce bottle. I can't tell. And there's artificial sweeteners in some of them, and there's shaky science about whether that's bad for you. I don't really want to go down that thing. But basically, the junk food hijacks whatever navigation system our body has evolved around food, and I think you say it in the book pretty well. You say the same system that used to tell us to eat fruit now just tells us to eat Fruit Loops.
That's exactly right. And what you realize then, it brings us right back to what you were saying about willpower. What the science shows when it comes to the causes of obesity is there's 3 kinds of cause. There's biological causes. Your genes can make you more sensitive to it. As you become obese, changes happen in your brain that make it harder to go back. There's psychological causes, things like comfort eating, trauma, all sorts of things can make us comfort ourselves with eating. And then there's social causes like the food supply system, right? So the fancy term for this is the biopsychosocial model. Biological causes, psychological causes, social causes. And they're all real. And when you think about it in that context, you begin to see where willpower comes in. Willpower is one little sliver of the psychological component to this, right? So it's real. And the way I started to think about willpower is it's like in this environment, willpower is like an umbrella in a bad storm. Some people, you hand them that umbrella, they're going to be able to get to the other side of the street and stay dry. And all credit to them. Good luck. If you can do it with willpower, if you can do it with calorie restriction and exercise, do it that way because there's very low risks to that compared to the options we're talking about. But for most people in this environment, the storm is so bad that it's going to break that umbrella. Right? So that to me is how we need to think about willpower.
I agree. I wanted to say this early in the show and just sort of we got sidetracked. I want to caveat this because I've gotten in some trouble on this show for so-called fat shaming, and so I always want to be careful in episodes where we talk about this kind of thing. I don't think I've ever actually done that, but pretty much anything you say about weight at all can trigger some people. And look, I'm less worried about the chronically offended as I am about the chronically overweight who've tried everything else. For me, like I said earlier, losing weight was a matter of getting educated about nutrition, willpower to stick to a healthy diet, which is not easy. And not everybody has the same problem because not everybody has the same genetics. Not everyone can afford to build a gym in their backyard during a pandemic. And so it's a position of immense privilege. And I'm also privileged to speak to my audience about this. And I want to make sure that we do that. And we are doing this, I think, in a way that is caring and understanding and results in people learning and feeling empowered by this and not feeling lectured by us, coming away feeling ashamed or hopeless. And I know you're on the same page, but I want to plant that flag.
Sure.
Because I just, you hate to get a letter from somebody that's like, I feel like crap after listening to your episode about this. And you're just like, oh, could that have been avoided?
And this is something I thought about really deeply for my book, Magic Pill, because, the worst moment for me in the whole writing of the book was, it was a while into working on the book and obviously taking the drug. I was FaceTiming with my niece, Erin, and she's actually 19 now, but in my head she's fixed as a 6-year-old. She's the baby in my family. She's the youngest. She's the only girl. So no one makes me more protective than her. Whenever she has a boyfriend, I always want to go, get away from her, you pedophile. But then I realised, oh no, she's like an adult woman now. Although I refuse to accept that. But so we were FaceTiming and she was kind of, teasing me. She go, oh, you look great. I never knew you had a neck before. I never knew you had a jaw. And I was kind of laughing and preening. And then she looked down and she said, will you buy me some Ozempic? And she's a totally healthy weight. And I thought she was kidding. I laughed. And then suddenly I realized she meant it. And I was like, have I undercut every message I've ever given her? So I wanted to think a lot about stigma and the messages we send. And one of the people who most helped me to think about this was an amazing woman called Shelley Bovey, who basically introduced body positivity to Britain, or as it would have been called then, fat pride. So when we were kids, right? Again, not a million years ago, fat people only ever appeared on television as the butt of a joke, particularly fat women, but fat men too, right? You think about like John Candy, right? It was presented as inherently hilarious that there were fat people in the world, right? And they were bullied and treated appallingly in every representation you saw of them. The first person I ever saw on television challenging that was Shelley. So I'll just tell you a bit about her story. I tracked her down to interview her about this because she's such a wise person. I saw her when I was 10 years old on TV, on like the equivalent to, I was about to say the equivalent to Oprah, but there is no equivalent to Oprah, but like a kind of trashier, lower rent equivalent of Oprah, much trashier, because Oprah is not trashy at all, she's divine. But so Shelley grew up in a working class town in Britain called Port Talbot. Like Scranton would probably be the American equivalent, something like that. Like a tough working class town. It had the biggest steelworks in Britain at the time. And she was, as she describes herself, the only fat girl in the school. And one day when she was 11, her teacher said to her, Bovey, stay behind after class, I want to talk to you. So she's sitting there thinking, what have I done wrong? She waits. A teacher says to her, you are much too fat. It's disgusting. Go see the school nurse. She'll sort you out. So completely thrown, Shelley walks over to the school nurse. The school nurse says, why are you here? She says, the teacher says I'm too fat. The nurse said, take off your clothes, I'll inspect you. And she starts pinching her and said, this is disgusting. You should be ashamed of yourself. And just berates her and tells her to stop being a pig, as she put it. So Shelley leaves completely shaken. And she basically spends her whole life soaking up being treated like that. That the other girls are just constantly saying, thank God I'm not as fat as you. And as she gets older, it's just everywhere. When she got pregnant, she went to the doctor. The first thing the doctor said was, well, you shouldn't be pregnant when you're as fat as you are. She had a very difficult birth. And as she was lying there covered in blood, the midwife said to her, you should really lose some weight. When her baby wouldn't attach properly, he wasn't feeding properly, she went to the doctor to get some help. And the doctor said, well, what are you trying to do? Make the baby as fat as you are. So it's just this
is insane.
But this is constant. 42% of women with a BMI higher than 35 get insulted every single day, right? Every day. So Shelley just completely internalized this at first. She told me she had never even looked at her own body in the shower naked because she was so disgusted. She thought it was so wrong. And then one day she learned that in the United States there was this movement, which at the time called itself Fat Pride, and some people still do, that basically said this is just bigotry. This is just a form of cruelty. We don't have to take being treated like this, and fought back, right? And so she introduced this to Britain. This is why when I was 10 years older, I see her on this kind of imitation of Oprah. And she's treated like a mad woman and the audience laugh at her. But nonetheless, her book was very successful. And a kind of modest body positivity movement is born in Britain. And Shelley, when I went to see her, she's 76 now, is incredibly proud of everything she did and stands by every word she said about stigma. But something else happened to Shelley next. She was very severely overweight. She was not even 50, and she was losing the ability to walk because of her weight. And she went to her doctor. She was in a wheelchair a lot of the time, and she went to her doctor, and the doctor said that he was worried about her heart. And he said, look, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but this is all connected to your weight. And Shelley felt this incredible dilemma because she absolutely believed every word she says about stigma. She's never doubted that that was true, nor should she. But she could also see the scientific evidence was clear that carrying the level of excess weight she did in her body was physically harming her, and indeed was going to kill her probably. And she was really struggling to reconcile these things. At the time, there was a body positivity newsletter called Fat News in Britain, and she wanted to write for it about this dilemma. And they said, no, that's not what we want. We talk about the positive things about being fat. And she's like, I get that, but we are much more likely to develop these problems. We do need to level about that. And they were kind of, no, that's not what we want. Now, Shelley lost a huge amount of weight by calorie restriction. She went to a kind of equivalent to Weight Watchers. Now, she's the first person to acknowledge that's extremely difficult. Only about 10% of people succeed at it. But she said to me, I know that weight loss saved my life. I wouldn't be alive at the age of 78. You know, if that hadn't happened, my heart problems went away when I lost weight. She said, we can't say we have a body positivity movement that isn't concerned at some level about keeping your body alive, right? So she said, we keep presenting it as if it's either or. Either you're opposed to stigma, or you're in favour of, if possible, reducing obesity for people. But she said, why is that the choice? It can be both and. If you love someone who's obese, and I would guess every single person listening is either obese or loves someone who's obese, what you want for them is to protect them from two things. You want to protect them from bullying and cruelty, which is what stigma is, and you want to protect them from the health harms of obesity, which are things like diabetes, cancer, heart disease, dementia, your knees and hips being destroyed, like just across the board. It's a form of love to be against both. Now, of course, you could be in favour of weight loss in a cruel, concern-trolling, vicious way, and we need to strongly oppose that. Or you can be in favour of weight loss where possible, through love and compassion. Now, some people, and I stress it is a minority within the body positivity movement, and I also want to stress I understand where they're coming from and I have a lot of sympathy for them, but some people have, I would argue, overcorrected. That everything they say about stigma is right, but some of them also argue that pointing out the scientific evidence about the harms caused by obesity, over which there is no scientific debate, it's one of the most proven facts in science, that pointing out those facts is itself a form of stigma.
Yes.
And that, I'm afraid, is not right.
Thanks for watching on YouTube. Remember, you can also enjoy The Jordan Harbinger Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our podcast feed is a treasure trove of insights from intellectuals, authors, spies, artists, athletes, pioneers, engineers, former mafia bosses, and business leaders, all sharing their secrets to success. For more information, click the link in the description. Now, back to the show. Something that hit for me when I was reading your book was the idea that if you've spent your whole life hearing abuse, being shamed, nearly everything coming in looks like abuse and shame, even if it's a doctor telling you in a nice way, that you are going to suffer from these consequences. This is very likely why I had some women in my inbox after a recent Feedback Friday episode. Those are our advice segments. They came at us really hatefully. And the advice we'd given, I went back and listened to it repeatedly because I was like, what did we do wrong? The advice we'd given was that there was a person working in a doctor's office, and her colleagues who were doctors were complaining about how they needed to lose weight because their body, their blood work was bad and they didn't fit into their clothes and they felt like crap. And this person was able to lose weight, and we gave her advice on gently approaching her colleagues and friends who were complaining about this on how to lose weight if they wanted, because she had done it successfully, and get advice from her on how to do so. And my co-host and I, we were shocked at how people viewed this as fat shaming. It was almost delusional, and we couldn't believe it when they told us what they were reacting to. And I found it really sad because these people, I couldn't get there mentally without severe, crazy gymnastics. These people must view nearly every discussion around health or weight as fat shaming, which has to be exhausting. At first I was annoyed, but now I just feel bad because that is not going to help them lose weight and live longer. And
I think we really need to understand where it comes from.
Yes.
There's an analogy that really helped me to think about this, right? As you know, obviously I'm gay. Maybe that's not obvious, or maybe I just sound British, but I'm in fact gay.
I think the Keanu thing was our first hint.
That gave it away. Well, come on, are you telling me you turned down Keanu? Let's be real here. But the, if you think about the AIDS crisis, right? When the AIDS crisis started, doctors warned, look, it's a scientific fact that this is going to affect gay men much more than other people because of the nature of anal sex, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And that's why there were moves in San Francisco to shut down the bathhouses, to shut down points of transmission that were spreading the virus, right? And loads of gay men, totally understandably, said, my whole life I've been told there's something wrong with being gay, we're disordered, we're disgusting, and here you are, these other authority people telling us we're disgusting and we can't have sex. I've seen this story, you will carry on going to our saunas, right? You're not going to shut them down. And I understand what was happening. They had been shamed and bullied all their lives, and it meant they couldn't hear this well-meant medical advice, actually essential medical advice, as anything other than more homophobia. And as a result, a lot of them died, right? Now, that's not their fault, right? In their position, I might well have been the same, because I see where it came from, and I think there's something very similar happening with what you're describing, and I think precisely because we want a body positivity movement to continue and survive, even if we reverse the obesity crisis back to where it was when we were born, right, when it wasn't a crisis, if we go back to looking like those beaches in 1979. There's still natural variety in body shapes, and we want everyone to feel good in their body. And so even if we solve this crisis, you'd still need a body positivity movement. But I think a lot about a guy I interviewed called Jeff Parker. Super nice guy. He's a retired lighting technician in San Francisco. He's 67, he must be 68 now. And he was very severely obese, and it was painful for him to walk anywhere. He had gout. He had liver and kidney problems and heart problems. Every morning he had to swallow fistfuls of pills. His doctor was very worried about him. And then his friend Mel gave him some Mounjaro, which is one of these drugs. And he lost an enormous amount of weight. He was taking off almost all his pills. His gout went away. Now he walks his dog over the Golden Gate Bridge every day and said, I'm going to enjoy my retirement now. Now, not everyone who takes a drug is going to have the experience of Jeff, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of the risks, but it's pretty soon every single person in the United States is going to know someone like Jeff, right? If they don't already. Someone whose health dramatically improved because they lost loads of weight because of these drugs. It was never scientifically plausible to claim that obesity doesn't harm health. Pretty soon it's not going to be emotionally plausible because everyone's going to be like, hey, what happened to Jeff? What happened to Bob? Hey, Susie, what do you mean you don't take these pills anymore and your heart problem's gone away and your diabetes has been reversed? What do you mean? How did that happen, right? So we absolutely desperately need a movement against stigma. If that movement implies that the scientific evidence about the harms caused by obesity is itself a form of stigma, as Shelley Bovey, the woman I was talking about, said to me, we have to live in reality. It doesn't serve anyone to not live in reality. The only person who pays the price for that in the end is you, right? We all know, we've all had moments in our lives where we want to not hear bad news. You don't open the bill you can't pay. You don't answer the call from your doctor that you're afraid to hear. But we all know that in the end, if you don't listen to bad news and adjust for it, who pays the price for that but you?
I couldn't agree more. This is this, in addition to the stigma, is one reason why I kind of waffle on using words like overweight or obese, right? Because I know you've got an opinion on this, which I also share. You can use euphemisms, but like, is that short-term relief at the expense of long-term honesty that could save someone's life?
Well, the
people
truth
say
is
like,
there's
oh,
a
you shouldn't
physical
use this word.
reality, right? The World
Yeah.
Health Organization, the leading medical body in the world, defines overweight and obesity very simply as carrying excess weight that poses a threat to health. That's a real phenomenon, right? We may want to change the words for it. I'm open-minded about that. But what we can't do is change the fact that there is an underlying physical reality there. Carrying excess weight poses a harm to health. Now, not for everyone, not in every case. My mother smokes 70 cigarettes a day. She's alive and well at the age of 78. But she's a statistical outlier, right? So some people come back and go, well, I weigh this and I'm alive and well. Unfortunately, again, the evidence is really clear on this. So, for example, there was a big study here in London of government bureaucrats that track their health over many years. And what it found is at the start, when they were young, the obese people and the other weight people had pretty similar health outcomes. But by 20, 30 years on, the obese people were 8 times more likely to become unwell than the people who were not obese. So there are ways of, particularly talking about this prior to these weight loss drugs, a lot of people would kind of go, well, I can't change it anyway. So why are you even telling me this? It's just upsetting me. Now we have this new tool. I mean, we did have tools before, but this is a much easier tool than the tools we had before, although it does carry these 12 big risks. I think we need to have a loving and compassionate conversation. And when I think about the people I love who are obese, it's that I desperately want to protect them both from bullying and from illness.
I hear you.
You can do both.
I think you're right. I think, and going back to what you'd said about our food system, I'm paraphrasing from your book, we built a food system that poisons us, and then to keep us away from the consequences, we inject ourselves with a different drug that makes us not want to eat. And I think the key question is, do we want to live in a world where we don't solve the underlying problem, but we just drug ourselves to get rid of the symptoms? Now, on the other hand, for some folks, this is the best solution for the situation at hand, as you kind of talked about towards the top of the show. And if somebody has cancer, we don't say, hey, we need to get pollution out of the atmosphere. I'm so sorry you got lung cancer. We pump them full of radiation and chemo to kill the cancer and keep them alive. So I'm not anti Ozempic at all. I'm really not. It's just, in part, I got to admit, man, part of me is also biased, and I'm trying to resist it. Like, there's a part of my brain that says I worked out and I dieted to lose weight and drugs are cheating. And I know that that's bullshit and that's unfair, but it's somehow that's in the back of my head. And I'm wondering what you think about that, because surely I'm not the only person who has that bias.
I felt it about myself.
Really?
For months and months when I was taking the drugs, I kept feeling like I was doing something really wrong. And I kept thinking, why is that? Like, one of my best friends takes statins for his cholesterol. I've never once looked at him and gone, you're cheating to get better cholesterol than me. It never crossed my mind. I would regard you as literally mad if you said that, right?
Yeah.
And yet these drugs bring out, remind me to come back to what you were saying before about dealing with the symptoms, not the causes, because that's a really important point as well, but that I have lots of thoughts on. But in terms of cheating, I began to I think one of the things that's really interesting here is these drugs are bringing to the surface lots of deep underlying ideas that have been kind of semi-conscious for a lot of us. Some of those things are like actually the things that drive why we eat, things like comfort eating, which was a very hard transition for me. But think about what you just said about cheating, right? And I appreciate your honesty about it, and I felt it too. If you look at the history of ideas about obesity, if you go back to, for example, in the 6th century, the Pope, Pope Gregory I, invented the 7 deadly sins, right? People know this partly because of the film Seven. Though it turns out Kevin Spacey was a bigger risk than the serial killer in that one. But hope he doesn't sue me for that. You think about the 7 deadly sins, one of them is gluttony, right? And it's always depicted with someone who's overweight, eating in some grotesque way, right? And if you think about how we think about weight loss, The only kind of weight loss we really like and admire is one that follows the old Catholic model of sin. You're a sinner, you have to go through hell, and then we'll forgive you, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
think about that show, The World's Biggest Loser, right? A disgusting game show where they get very severely overweight people and make them actually do things that are very dangerous for their health, like starve themselves and take part in very extreme forms of exercise to compete to be the biggest loser, right? And that's a classic model, right? Yeah, we'll forgive you for being fat if you've tortured yourself, right? The more agonizing a diet is, the more extreme the exercise program, the more likely we are to go, fair enough, Bob paid his price, right? We don't quite articulate it that way. Or you think about another way, which is cheating. Lots of people in our culture, particularly women, because of the pressures that are put on them, are making massive sacrifices every day to be thin or thinner, right? They're denying themselves food. They're going hungry. They're uncomfortable. And I can well understand, to them, I must look like Lance Armstrong looks to a cyclist. It's like, what? I put in all this effort. I do all this work. I deprive myself. And you just inject yourself once a week in the leg and you get to look the same way I do. I can well understand it, but I think we need to unpick these ideas. Firstly, I think we can move beyond the idea of sin. We should be able to think a little bit better than a 6th century pope by now. But when it comes to cheating, I actually think we are in a race. We are competing, but it's not me competing against my neighbour. It's all of us competing against the forces that have made us obese, processed and ultra processed foods. And I went to countries where they dealt with that problem. Japan, for example, 42.5% of Americans are obese, 4% of Japanese people are obese, right?
Wow.
And it's mind-blowing when you go there and see how they did it. I'm sure we'll come back to that. It's kind of weird that we expect Japanese people to look like sumo wrestlers, because that's basically like expecting an American to look like a bald eagle. But it's very rare. But so you're totally right. And this actually comes back to the other thing I wanted to pick up on, which is when you were saying as well about, this was one of my biggest concerns about taking these drugs. I went to my closest friend. I think it was maybe 3 months into doing it. I was researching a lot of the stuff about why obesity had risen at first. And I said to her, I've got to stop taking these drugs. I'm being a complete hypocrite here. I write all these books about how we need to deal with these deep underlying social causes of problems and not deal with the symptoms. And here I am with a problem that's got profound environmental causes. And here I am jabbing myself to deal with the symptoms and congratulating myself on how good I look, right?
Right.
This is bullshit. And so this is a friend of mine who, 8 years ago, she got very bad breast cancer. She nearly died. And she's a single mum, so you can imagine how horrendous it was. And I was with her all through the chemo and the double mastectomy and the hysterectomy and all those things. And she said to me, Johann, when I got breast cancer, we could have said something really is happening in our environment that's causing breast cancer. 1 in 7 British women get breast cancer, 1 in 8 American women. That didn't happen in the recent past in our parents' generation, not happening in Japan, where 1 in 38 women get breast cancer. Something is going on that's causing breast cancer, right? So you could have said to me, you've already got this problem caused by the environment. Don't inject yourself with all these poisons. But no, you said, let's make sure you live to fight another day. Then we can think about the environmental causes. And she gave me this really great analogy. She said, imagine if your house is on fire. You could make a very good argument to say, we should change the building code so houses get built out of less flammable materials. You could make a very strong argument to go, apartment blocks, make sure they've got sprinklers. But if your house is on fire, that's no fucking use to you. Call the fire brigade and douse the house in water, right? In the same way, she's like, yes, this is a hugely environmentally driven problem. We've got to deal with that. But how does it help for you to just sacrifice yourself on that? I'm strongly in favour of gun control. Many reasonable people I love disagree with me, but I'm strongly in favour of gun control. Partly because I've known so many people who were murdered with guns in the US. But if someone gets shot in front of me, I don't stand over them going, well, we must close the gun show loophole and we must get background checks for everyone who goes in to buy a gun. I say, call a fucking ambulance, right? There's no contradiction between dealing with the symptom and dealing with the deeper causes, especially if failing to deal with the symptom for you will mean that you die. You can't deal with environmental causes if you die. So that really helped me to. And another guy who really underscored that for me was Jeff Parker, that guy I was talking about in San Francisco, who, when I said to him, but don't you think we should be dealing with the environmental causes? He said to me, 100%, sign me up. I'll join that fight. But let's be honest, I'll be dead by the time we solve that problem. I want to live, right? And I found that very hard to rebut. There's many legitimate reasons to reject these drugs and be concerned about these drugs, but I don't think that's the right one.
I agree. I mean, we at the same time that we look at these solutions, we have to come to terms with what eating does for us, right? The underlying issue needs addressing. And it goes to your earlier point about the Ozempic just addressing the symptoms of the eating. And I found it interesting you mentioned how often people substitute the eating for something else like booze or even exercise. And we see this with bariatric surgery patients going and finding something that's not food. Like, I don't know if they start smoking, but some of them start drinking. I'm sure some start smoking. And some start going to the gym 4 times a day. And I know somebody who used to be overweight and eat a bunch, and they lost a bunch of weight, and now they go to the gym literally 4 times. They work out, I should say, 4 times per day. That is not normal. And I asked him, do you think you just substituted one addiction for another? And he goes, oh yeah, 100%. It's just that this one's less likely to kill me because I'm doing a lot of yoga and a lot of weightlifting, and and I'm just like, gosh, but 4 times. I mean, if you do anything 4 times a day that takes an hour, that's a part-time job, man. And I actually found it here's a whole separate show I want to do. You mentioned that sometimes being overweight is psychologically comforting, and there's a connection between sexual abuse and weight gain. Can you speak to that a little bit? I literally want to do like a whole episode on that because I just find that endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own experience in relation to this, not the abuse component, but something else, and then talk about the abuse thing. The evidence about abuse. This was probably, for me personally, other than that moment with my niece, the hardest element of taking the drugs. And it really became clear to me, I had an epiphany about it. I was in Vegas. As you know, I'm writing a book about a series of crimes that have been happening in Vegas, and I was researching the murder of someone I knew and loved. So obviously it's a very painful thing to do. And really on autopilot, I went to this KFC I've been to 1,000 times. It's on West Sahara for people in Vegas. It's the skeeziest KFC in Vegas, which is saying something. And,
yeah, it is.
And we're good at skeezy fast food places in Vegas. And I went in and I ordered what I would have ordered a year before. I ordered a bucket of fried chicken. And I sat down and I had a chicken drumstick. And I remember almost hearing it as a voice in my head, looking at this chicken and thinking, shit, I can't eat this. I'm just going to have to feel bad. And one of the fascinating things about these drugs is because they so radically interrupt your eating patterns, for many people, not everyone, they bring to the surface the underlying drivers of your eating all along. So I go through 5 drivers of eating in the book, but you've gone to one that I found really difficult. So I interviewed a man called Dr. Vincent Felitti. He's a doctor. He was in San Diego in 1981, obviously long before I met him. And he was approached by Kaiser Permanente, one of the big not-for-profit medical providers in California. And they said, look, we've got a problem. Obesity's blowing up. In fact, it was laughably low by our standards, but it was blowing up. And we give people diet advice and it doesn't work. And we even give people personal trainers, it doesn't work. What can we do? Can we give you a load of money to just do blue skies research and figure out what the hell's going on? He said, sure. And then he's like, oh shit, what am I going to do? So he started working with 200 severely obese people who weighed more than 300 pounds. And he thought, well, what can I do with them? And he had an idea that sounds, and in fact is quite dumb. He said, what would happen if really obese people literally stopped eating and we gave them like vitamin shots so they didn't get scurvy or whatever? Would they burn through the fat supplies in their body and get down to a healthy weight? So with an absolute shit ton of medical supervision, they did it. And incredibly, at first, it worked. There's a woman who I'm going to call Susan, not her real name, who went down from being more than 400 pounds to 132 pounds, like a staggering level of weight loss.
Wow.
And Dr. Felitti, she's saying to him, you've saved my life. Her family are ringing up and saying, you've saved her life. Mind-blowing. And one day something happened that no one expected. Susan cracked. She went to KFC, or actually, I think that's me projecting. I don't think it was KFC, but somewhere, and starts hugely overeating, and quite quickly went back to a, dangerous weight. Not where she'd been, but a dangerous weight. And Dr. Felitti said, when he called her in, "Susan, what happened?" As she looked down, she said, I don't know. She was obviously really ashamed. He said, "Well, Susan, tell me about the day you cracked. Did anything in particular happen that day?" It turned out something had happened that day that had never happened to Susan before. She was in a bar and a man hit on her, not in a nasty way, in a nice way, and she felt completely freaked out and went and started eating. This is when Dr. Felitti asked her something he'd never thought to ask his patients before. He said, "Susan, when did you start to gain your weight?" In her case, it was when she was 11. He said, "Well, did anything happen when you were 11 that didn't happen when you were 9 or 14? Anything in particular happen that year?" And Susan looked down and she said, "Well, that's when my grandfather started raping me." Dr. Felitti interviewed everyone in the program, and he discovered that 60% of the women had made their extreme weight gain in the aftermath of being sexually abused or assaulted. And at first he was like, "Why? What is this about?"
Mm-hmm.
And Susan explained it to him really well. She said, "Overweight is overlooked, and that's what I need to be. Gaining weight has a sexually protective function. Of course, it can still happen, but you're significantly less likely to be raped if you're very overweight." Roxane Gay, a brilliant writer, has written about she was gang raped when she was 11 by a group of boys, and very consciously thought, that must never happen to me again. I'm going to eat as much as I can, to be as fat as I can, to ward off male attention. And so when we think about obesity, one of the things we have to think about is the psychologically positive functions of obesity. That's one of them. There are other ones. It can lower people's expectations of you because of stigma, which can be something that a lot of people need, right? There's all sorts of things that can happen. And it can also mean that when people take the drugs, they suddenly feel incredibly frightened and vulnerable. And they don't know why. And of course, there's many reasons why, and it can be related to the other psychological factors as well, but that's one of them. It's why a lot of people have heard this phrase by now, but Dr. Robert Ander, who worked on that research with Dr. Felitti, that's why he said when we see people who appear to be doing something dysfunctional, massively overeating, injecting drug users, whatever it might be, we need to stop asking what's wrong with you and start asking what happened to you.
Mm-hmm. I think that is, well, one, like I said, endlessly fascinating, and two, this is the real part of the real epidemic, right? It's because, look, that 60% figure is enormous. And what fills in the other 40%? Because there's probably other trauma that fills in at least some of that is not sexually abusive in nature. It could be bullying. It could be literally anything else. And fighting those underlying causes seems to be the key here. I do want to, I know we're running out of time. I want to talk a little bit about the potential, not just side effects of these drugs. I mean, there's Ozempic face and Ozempic butt, where you sort of empty out of fat and then you need fillers to correct it, which is, those are cosmetic side effects. But what about things like cancers or the idea, first of all, don't our bodies resist change as well? Isn't there a hormonal component? I know you mentioned when you're dieting, and I had this as well. You see food and you're like, I really want to eat that right now. Like you're just focused on it because you're hungry in some ways, and metabolism changes. We evolved to hold on to fat, right? We evolved to thrive in lean times, and we're not going to change that without. There's no amount of therapy that can change that. This is our evolution, correct?
I think there's some truth in what you're saying. One of the weird things about these drugs is we don't actually know how they work. We know a few things. It's very disconcerting to interview the leading scientists and realize this. So we know a few things for sure. If you ate something now, Jordan, don't matter what it is, after a while your pancreas would produce a hormone called GLP-1. And that's part of your body's natural signals just saying, hey, Jordan, you've had enough, stop eating. It's the brakes, basically. But that natural GLP-1 only stays in your system for a couple of minutes, then it's washed away. What these drugs do is they inject you with an artificial copy of GLP-1 that instead of sticking around for a few minutes, stays around for a whole week. It's why when I went to the cafe up the road, a few mouthfuls and I'm full, right? Because I'm so close to full already because of this GLP-1 already being in my system. Initially, it was thought, well, okay, GLP-1 is a hormone that's made in the gut. The effects of this drug are mostly in the gut. It might be it's slowing down gastric emptying, something like that. And there are definitely effects on the gut. Everyone agrees on that. But we also know that you don't just have GLP-1 receptors in your gut, you've got them in your brain. And it's increasingly clear that these drugs work primarily on your brain. It's very disconcerting. We don't know how. But we know that if you give these drugs to a rat, for example, and then you cut open its brain, which obviously we're not allowed to do with humans, you see that the drug goes everywhere in the brain, right? And the kind of effects we're seeing are clearly brain effects. And, Dr. Clémence Blouet, who's a brilliant obesity specialist at Cambridge University, said to me, the brain is the most complex object in the whole universe. We shouldn't be surprised we don't understand everything about it. But if you think about, there's several different theories about what's happening in the brain. And one of them relates to what you just asked. So you were talking about how we resist change. We try to hold higher levels of weight, right? So if you gained 3 stone now, I'm terrible at pounds, so you barbaric colonials don't use the measurements that we use.
Stone. I like that.
41,
though.
if you gained 41, if you gained 41, if you gained 41 pounds now, or whatever. Anyway, and then you tried to lose weight, you would find it hard to go back because your brain tries to hold on to the excess fat. It slows your metabolism down. It makes you crave more sugary and salty foods and sweet foods. It makes you more lethargic, so it's harder to exercise. There's all sorts of changes that happen, and for which there's a lot of scientific evidence. Some scientists argue, and I stress this is a speculative theory, that what this drug does is it undoes that effect. It undoes that resistance to change. That in a way, and I'm putting this more crudely than the scientists would, that it's a bit like resetting your iPhone to the factory settings, right? It just lowers that effect that you get after you gain weight that makes it so hard to come back. That's one potential way of thinking about it. There are other theories we don't really know. But it also makes me think about what you're saying. My book is called Magic Pill because there's 3 ways these drugs could be magic, right? The first way is the most obvious. They could just solve the problem, right? And I've got to tell you, Jordan, there are days when it feels like that. My whole life, I have overeaten shitty food. And now once a week, I inject myself in the leg. Boom, I don't eat anything like as much of it. It feels like magic. The second way is much more disturbing. It could be a magic trick. It could be like a conjurer who shows you a card trick while picking your pocket, right? It could be that the 12 risks that I go through in the book of these drugs undo the good or outweigh the good, right? The third way in which it could be magic is actually the one I think is the most likely. If you think about the classic stories of magic that we grew up with, think about what would be a good example, Aladdin, right? You find the lamp, you rub it, you get the genie, you make the wish, and your wish comes true, but never quite in the way you expected, right? It starts to unfold in some complicated, weird way that you could never have foreseen at the start. Or think about Fantasia. You unleash the magic and it starts to run away from you. We're already at that point. 47% of Americans want to take these drugs, right? 47%.
Wow.
It's transforming the economy in all sorts of crazy ways. Barclays Bank commissioned a very sober-minded financial analyst to look into the science of these drugs, to do a report to guide their future investment decisions. And she came back and said, if you want a comparison for how big these drugs are going to be, you've got to look at the invention of the smartphone. Right?
Wow.
And I think she's right. My best prediction would be 8 years from now when Ozempic goes out, assuming we don't discover some horrific side effect, and I do not rule that out, but assuming we're not in a fen-phen scenario, I would anticipate, so Ozempic goes out of patent in 2032, at which point you'll be able to manufacture them as pills for $40 a month. I would guess half the population of the United States will be taking them, roughly. I mean, that's going to transform the economy. Look already what's happening. Krispy Kreme stocks are down. Head of Nestle is publicly shitting himself about the future of the ice cream market.
That's crazy.
Jewelers in LA have had a huge run on refitting wedding rings because people's fingers have shrunk so much in LA that their wedding bands no longer fit them, right?
Wow.
There was just a big report for the American Airlines that said prepare to spend much less money on jet fuel because pretty soon we're going to have a much thinner population, right? And it obviously costs more money to fly people who are larger. So
Wow.
this is
I'm sure they're going to pass those savings down to us, right? That's
I'm
how that
sure,
works?
yeah. That's the nature of capitalism.
Always. Man, that's crazy. That by the time you're manufacturing fewer knee and hip replacements and saving millions of dollars on airline fuel, and Nestle's like, oh crap, how are we going to sell all this stuff that makes people sick? Like I mean, it's really you kind of want to be Team Ozempic at that point, right? You're like, oh, good, but again, we're not solving the underlying problem.
We're not solving the underlying problem,
what
and
freaks me out.
there are risks. Now, of course, we can do both. We can treat the problem in the same way that I call an ambulance for my friend who's been shot and I fight for gun control. We can take the drugs and deal with the underlying factors that are causing it. Indeed, one of the things I hope is that it wakes us up, that we go, how the do we get into this situation where we're forced to choose, particularly for our children, between a risky medical condition and a risky drug? And it's worth just unpacking a little bit more. I should go in like 5 minutes, but unpacking a little bit more some of the risks. I'll give you an example. When you talk about the safety of these drugs, what most of the experts say, and they're making a good and important point, is we actually know quite a lot about these drugs in the medium term because diabetics have been taking them for 18 years now. And I'm putting it more crudely than they would, but basically, if the drugs gave you horns, the diabetics would have grown horns by now, right? And that's a good and important point. And it should give people some sense of security. But some equally reputable and brilliant scientists said, well, hang on a minute. If we're going to base a key plank of our belief in the safety of these drugs on the diabetics, let's dig a little bit deeper into the diabetics. So, for example, there's a brilliant scientist called Professor Jean-Luc Fahy, who's at the University Hospital in Montpellier in France. And he was commissioned by the French Medicines Agency to look into the safety of these drugs for the French market. So he looked at what's called the preclinical evidence, the animal trials. And he was immediately struck by one thing. If you give these drugs to rats, they're much more likely to get thyroid cancer. And we have GLP-1 receptors in our thyroid, in addition to our brain and our gut. So it kind of makes sense that there's at least a plausible mechanism there. If you're screwing with GLP-1, you might be screwing with the thyroid.
Sure.
So he started to look at, could this be happening with humans? So he looked at, they have very good medical databases in France because they don't have HIPAA rules like we do. So you have to be on the database. And he looked at a really large group of diabetics. I think they were people who were taking the drug between 2006 and 2012, if I remember right. And he compared them to a really big group of diabetics who were not taking these drugs, who are in every other way similar. And what he found, if he's right and it's highly contested, is very sobering. He calculated that these drugs increase your thyroid cancer risk by between 50 to 75%. Now,
wow.
When at first you read that and he said that to me, I was like, what the f***? He said, no, you need to understand what that doesn't mean. It doesn't mean if you take the drug, your chance of getting thyroid cancer. If that were the case, we'd be having bonfires of Ozempic everywhere in the world. What it means is whatever your thyroid cancer risk was at the start, it will increase, if he's right, by 50 to 75%. Now, thyroid cancer is relatively rare. 1.2% of people get it. 84% of people survive. Nonetheless, that's a flashing red light for me, particularly when we remember that with fen-phen, these things start small, right? The things that unravels fen-phen were a few doctors in Fargo, saying, oh, it looks like our patients can't breathe very well when they take this drug, right? So, although I want to be balanced about this because I think the truth is balanced, against that, some other scientists said to me, well, even if Professor Fahy is right and it does significantly increase the thyroid cancer risk, you've got to compare that to the cancer risk just from being obese. Cancer Research UK, one of the biggest cancer groups in the whole of Britain, in fact, in the whole of Europe, has explained if you carry excess weight, it doesn't just sit there, it's not inert in your body, it's active, it sends signals through your body. One of those signals is for cells to divide more rapidly, which can cause cancer. This is why, actually, although we don't talk about it this way, obesity is one of the biggest causes of cancer in both Britain and the United States. So again, at every stage when you think, oh, I've got a thing to hold on to here, you realise that in this very complex calculation, what I really recommend people do is that they go down the list of the 12 risks that I write about in the book. They go down the risks of obesity. They try to weigh these for themselves. It's so hard to talk about this without using words like weighing as well. Very unfortunate.
Yeah.
There isn't. I think anyone is just like there's a blanket answer for everyone, unless your BMI is lower than 27, in which case I think there is a blanket answer. Don't take them. You don't have the risks of being overweight or obese, so you're taking on all the risks of the drug for none of the benefits, none of the physical benefits. Unless you're in that category, I think it's a fiendishly complicated decision, and you should inform yourself in great detail about those risks. Also, you should inform yourself about things like what it's going to do to you when you take it. I hope the book helps prepare people to know that. And we should all be thinking about what it does to the culture, because you may be sitting here thinking, I'm not interested in taking these drugs. But, in 2007, when Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone, you may well not have been interested in buying an iPhone.
Yeah.
But the smartphone, you might still not be interested in having a smartphone, but the smartphone changed the world around you for damn sure. And these drugs are going to change the world around us for better and for worse. For better for people with serious obesity or just obesity. For worse with people with eating disorders, and in between for everyone else, right? So I think we've got to reckon with the complexity, because the stakes here are so high. Professor Gerald Mann, who I mentioned before, has calculated that 678,000 Americans die every year as a result of obesity, or what he calls food-related illnesses caused by our shitty diets, right? That's more than all the American soldiers who died in the entire 20th century combined.
Wow.
That's 10 times more almost than the number of people who die by being shot every year. Almost everyone listening will not have loved someone who died of obesity, although we don't talk about that. Your uncle dies of a heart attack at 61. Your aunt got breast cancer at 50. We don't say they died of obesity, but obesity is such a driver of those factors that it may well have been, right? So the stakes here are really high. Whether we get this right or wrong is hugely consequential. And I'm not sure I've made the right decision even for myself, never mind advising anyone else. So
Yeah.
I would say don't trust anyone who's highly confident on this. Trust the people who are talking you through the detail.
That's right. Yeah. Go through your doctor, read this book,
Yeah.
and do the math, and don't order that crap online thinking like, oh, I got this. I watched a couple of YouTube videos, including this one, for God's sake.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your candor, your transparency. Not a lot of people are going to put something like this in their body and then as an experiment, and then spend the next few years writing about it. And also hit a brother with an invite next time you go to one of those Hollywood parties. I got poopy diapers all day over here. Could use a little glamour.
Hooray, I'll do it.
Thank you for checking out this entire episode on YouTube. If you want to follow up on this topic, check out our podcast feed or visit us on our website at jordanharbinger.com, where you can learn more about our guest and dive even deeper into what we discussed today. And remember, YouTube is not the only place that you can check out The Jordan Harbinger Show. Any podcast app should have us. Check out the links in the description where you will find access to our shows that don't appear on YouTube, like Skeptical Sunday, where we debunk topics like crystal healing, GMOs, conspiracy theories, homeopathy, tipping, even lawns, to find out if they're backed by science and logic, or if they're just complete nonsense. Spoiler, many of them are complete nonsense. Also, our Feedback Friday shows where we help people escape from cults, get raises at work, and take all manner of questions from you, the audience, all the way down to the bottom of the barrel. And every episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show has something useful you can take away and apply in your own life and help you navigate what I know can often seem like the overwhelming and paralyzing challenges of modern life. Life can be hard, yes, but we are here to help. And if you appreciate how we help, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.